Right, good evening, folks. Welcome to Friday Night Fights. Yes. Yes, the battles we've all been waiting for. Let's open up all the chat rooms here so I can see all the interesting ideas and questions and so forth. ChessDojo. Hang on a moment. I've got 2 out of 3 kids down, so I'm gonna go tuck one last little pumpkin into bed. I'll be right back, and we'll get into the commentary on this exciting French defense game, maybe? Okay. Knight to g3. Shall we catch up with this game, see how they got here? French defense, we got that. Knight d2. Okay. Knight f6 and f4. Okay, this is a real line from David Pruess. Taking a real lock on the center here. Yeah, very hard for black to equalize the central situation here. And Rita plays a move I have never seen anybody try before here. My general understanding is that it should be really bad, so to speak. But I've never seen it, so I'm curious to see how good or bad it feels in an actual game, you know? Normally, what does black do? They play like bishop e7, f6, castle, something like that. But it's been a while since I've studied this line. It was pre-computers the last time I studied it, and it's a very, very combative and difficult variation. And black was trying weird things like g5 to undermine the center, or they were trying things like f5 when white doesn't want to take en passant, just to lock it up and keep white from later playing f5 to attack. So, you know, why not try something new to David? And maybe computers say this move's great, and I'll be able to learn something completely new here. So white plays knight e2. Often you play h4 in these positions, but maybe here black can play h5, and it's hard to keep going forward. I can see the point of knight e2. There could be positions where you play like f5, ef5, knight f4 and go after this pawn, maybe? I don't know. Hey, ZJ and Oscar. Hope you guys are doing good. I'm just catching up to the live position on this game, and then we can chit-chat a little bit, hear how your Friday's gone. So Rita follows up with knight b6. This move also surprises me. You know, even after seeing c4, because when I see c4, I'm expecting b5, b4. You know, like a full space grab on the queen side. Yeah, interesting. Instead we get a knight maneuver that lets the bishop control and stop these f5 moves faster. But what's Rita's plan? Let's see, g4, h5. Oof! Well, there goes your king side, Alvin. What? Once a month. And how sad for the people who play Bullet every day and don't go up as much as you do playing once a month, huh? G4, H5. That seemed to just straight up refute Alvin here on this G4 move. Thought a minute on it. And then just, yeah, the whole king side's locked. So now what good does that space advantage do you? There goes White's position. And then spending more time just building the Great Wall of China / France in this case. Terrible. It turns out terrible. So what should White have done here? Well, bishop e3, g3, bishop g2, some moves like that maybe. When you eventually play g4, it is your main plan to play g4 and f5. But when you eventually play g4, you have to be ready to back it up with h3. This is just an absolute disaster. If h3, then black takes, right? And you can't recapture. Probably taking is less bad than pushing past, though. At least something is open on this side of the board now, right? Then rook takes, knight g3, rook goes back, and maybe f5 here. Yeah, but I mean, after g5, it's like you could resign as White. Ay, ay, ay. It's like, oof. Yeah, now tries to counter on the queen side, but what for? You're only going to lose there. I don't know what to suggest for White after this gets locked up like this. There's basically no plan left. Nothing to do. I suppose I would just stack a pawn with f5. You know, if black takes, then I'll play knight f4 and see if I can't eventually win this pawn. Bishop e2 and stuff. And if black takes the other way, then I'll still play knight f4. They'll keep everything solid like this. And I guess I'll just hope that I don't lose, right? That there's enough pressure, enough well-placed pieces that they can't play b5, b4 and just crush me. So hopefully the pressure on d5 holds black back a little. I'll move this knight to e3 eventually. I guess that's what I would try here. Yeah, black's going to have to eventually move the knight on b6 and then play b5, b4. But at this point, it looks kind of inevitable. So I think this is the only thing for White to do is sack this pawn. When you play b3, I mean, then you save black the trouble of b5, b4, right? So Rita conquers the c4 square and ensures the position stays somewhat open. There's the c4 square for you. Great start for Rita. Hoo la la. All right. Now, let me see if we have an under 1600 section as well today, okay? Let's have a look. Let's see. Very often, the two sections don't both hold when I'm not there to sort of make an announcement as the tournament starts. Yeah, it looks like there's no under 1600 today, huh? Ah, well. Ah, welly welly. So, ZJ, Oscar, how was your Friday? We've got ZJ who just crossed 1800 in Bullet for the first time. Morning, Owl. Let me quickly edit the MooBot just so when people come in later they can find the right section for the fights. So just say one section tonight, 90 plus 30. And then we'll cut out this under 1600 thing here and save. And there we go. You also hit a new peak. 2341 in Blitz. The attack book by Vukovic. Nice. Sounds pleasant. I am once again, Oscar Chess, at my Blitz peak. Just like last time you saw me, probably. Owing to I haven't played a Blitz game in a month. Or whatever, 3 weeks, or whenever it was that I hit it. I think it was June 20 something. So yeah, it's been almost a month. Hey, Elise. The Women's World Cup, right? I stopped watching it when Carissa got knocked out in the Rapids. She was the only person I was really motivated to follow. How are you enjoying the event? Do you have any picks? Anyone who looks particularly good right now this week? Indeed, I don't consider Bullet to be chess, but you still hit a peak in Bullet, so cool. Yeah, Sveshnikov's a good choice, ZJ. Great opening to learn. Oh, we had a couple moves here. So Alvin developed the bishop. Rita brought the knight into this weak spot, and then Alvin traded it, making the bishop d3 move look not that great. But I think the reason was Black's attacking a4 with 3 pieces. So the trade takes the knight off of capturing the pawn for now. If at all possible, I'd be inclined to play bishop c2 instead, because trading your good piece when every single pawn is stuck on a dark square seems worse than losing your a pawn. Like, if bishop takes c4 is to not lose the a pawn, then I think there's a saying that the medicine is worse than the disease, or the remedy is worse than the disease, right? Trading off this light squared bishop is a worse loss than that weak a pawn, which is just bad. I'm following the 960 somewhat. You know, my kids are on summer vacation, so I'm not following any of these things as closely as I normally do. Also, they switched from classical 960 to rapid 960. When it was classical 960 in these freestyle events, I watched everything. Is that right, Elise? So even girls are running around calling everybody bruh, bruh, bruh? That's very weird to me as an old person. Maybe it's super cool. I don't know. But yeah, the 960, they switched to 10 minutes, super fast. So my interest plummeted. And, you know, 960 is more difficult in a certain sense, more disorienting, right, than normal chess. Normal chess already is difficult and disorienting to some extent, right? But 960 is more difficult, especially like you just don't have like an immediate, oh, at least I know something about the structure, or I see who's stronger on the right or the left or something, right? But at 10 minutes, I mean, you can hardly figure out where your pieces, what their development squares might be in 10 minutes. So it's it doesn't make any sense to me, and to play 960 that fast, I think is extremely difficult. I don't think the players, can handle it particularly well. I think it's tiring, and yeah, I mean, even Magnus wasn't handling it. It's yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Oh, you had one at your club, Oscar? That's cool. You like atomic chess. Okay. I haven't really played atomic chess since I was quote unquote a kid. I mean, when I started playing in chess tournaments, I was already 12. So when I say kid, I mean whatever, an adolescent. But yeah, I've never played atomic chess really at a quote unquote higher level, since becoming a stronger chess player. So I don't know how interesting or good or whatever atomic chess is. Oh, look at this b5 here. This pawn can't take because of the rook. So Alvin loses that a pawn anyway, like one move later, right? So the bishop sacrifice was clearly in vain. Yeah, ZJ, it is for those players who have more or less mastered normal chess. That's exactly who it's for. I agree. So you don't need to be a fan of it. Just as I don't need to be a fan of Bullet. Obviously, for some people, Bullet's great. And I'm not one of them. And Chess 960 is great for me, but not for everybody else, right? All right, what does Purist say about 960? Pick a position at the beginning of a season, then freeze it for some amount of time. Yep. I think that's cool too, Purist. I've thought of that. I thought of that format back before computers were so overwhelmingly good. Now you would kind of let the computer crunch on the thing and then memorize stuff from the computer. In the past, you'd have to figure it out for yourself gradually over a few tournaments, which would be super cool. But now that the computers are insane, I'm not sure if it would make the most sense anymore, right? Because the people who are playing it are largely playing it to escape from the computer stuff, and then it would basically be a huge advantage to memorize some moves that the computer gave you. You couldn't memorize as much, right? Because you wouldn't have as much time. But essentially, it would be a dominant strategy to memorize stuff, I think. Yeah, okay, so Rita's in no hurry to take that pawn on a4. Brings the queen to bear. a4 still looks pretty dead, but I suppose it could try to make a run for it. Yeah, the position's pretty dead for white, Oscar. I mean, they've got the dead bishop. They've got weak light squares everywhere. The king side's frozen. They can't make any breaks. Their pieces aren't coordinated or attacking anything. Black doesn't really have anything to attack, even if white had managed to develop their pieces at some point. It's, yeah, it's a grim situation for Alvin, and it's all traced to that 1g4 move. But if your opponent's good enough, a single pawn structure mistake can decide a game. I think this game, barring some kind of, crazy blunder from Rita, eventually in, 2 hours, we'd go back and we'd say, yeah, G4 on move 9, lost the game strategically. And partly because of the follow-up mistake, maybe after GH5, it's still just a game, right? And after G5, that's where you're really, that's where you've really thrown it. Yeah, well, no harm in throwing out a request, right? And seeing whether other people have some of the same interests as you. Okay, the knight retreats from G3 to cover the C3 pawn. Seems like a very good time for black to capture white's pawn. That's a strong pass A pawn right there. I think white would probably play bishop A3 to block the pawn from going further. Is there no way to mess up the position or drum something up for white? Are they completely condemned to a loss after playing G5? Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I had the suggestion of F5, which might have made the game more difficult for black way earlier, just sacking a pawn so that the pawn structure is not so set. But now, having given up the light squared bishop as well, I mean, it's just been, yeah, advantage after advantage accruing for Rita. Probably takes a lot of discipline to think about your moves in Rita's situation here. When your position is just so winning and there's not much tension, hard to stay focused and calculating and, danger detectors on and all that. I guess Strategy Gaming's wondering if Lead Chess has a bunch of variants on it. So this is the only game I saw, Oscar. Maybe another game will have started while we've been watching. Not yet. Oh, there are some games. All right. 2 new games. Beautiful. All right, we got 316 against Gilo Shigeno. I want to see their flag. Give me a second. It looks like a Philippine flag, yeah. And greetings, ACM. And then we've got another game here. Ho Along against Hinakaki. And has black sacked a pawn, seemingly. Well, that's interesting. Let's see what it was. Oh, it's this trap line of the Petrov. So black just sacks a pawn from the get-go and just says, I'll just play the game down a pawn. Wow. Hello, Sanyal. How is your week? Do you I don't know if I established last week whether or not you sometimes have weekends off. Do you work 7 days a week or 5 or 6? So just play the whole game down a pawn. Wild. White kind of asked for that G5, didn't they? They like waved a red flag in front of a bull rush of pawns. Here come Kaki's pawns. So that's going to be the beginnings of a demonstration on the king's side, just building a little bit of space and strength. You're in striking distance of the white king's castle position, but you are playing a position without queens down a pawn. It's not easy. Not easy. A Wonder did draw Aronian with this line. It is, I believe, a Wonder's fault that this line came back into tournament play, and I've seen people other than a Wonder use it since that game with Aronian. But yeah, of course, a Wonder played more normal move d6 instead of f6. Right. All right, you've got Saturday and Sunday for some games. Phew! I'm glad to hear that, son, y'all. I'm really glad to hear that. I've been wondering about that all week. Yeah. So now how to understand her move here with a5. I guess she thought white's best plan would be b4, knight b3 with an expansion on the other side of the board, and she wasn't yet sure that either of these moves were helpful, so she just restrains the plan for white for a moment, maybe. Interesting. Okay, and what were our other positions? Let me just click around between them as well. We had this one here, which looks like a King's Indian defense. Yeah. F3 variation, King's Indian. So E4 is well protected. D4 less so, because there's no knight coming to F3. Black castles, plays the normal E5 move. White locks the center. Black prepares F5. White just trades it as soon as it gets there. My inclination as white would be to make my pawn break here if it's offered to me so early. But okay, we get queen d2, white trades, black recaptures, and white castles over here. Whoa. Risky business from 316. Black's got some real chances here. And I want to say not just risky, I actively don't really like this for white. I don't see the point of castling queenside here when you're already sort of making concessions in the center with ef5. They can play e4 at some point if they want to. And it's just a loose position, you know. Sometimes you castle queenside by surprise for other reasons, but seems like here you'd want to be doing something unusual like g4 and h5 to justify this. Well, that said, maybe white should play g4 here, right? Oh no, you didn't sleep because you were watching a chess tournament in the US? That's bad luck for your life. A5 from black, by the way. I mean, I would consider another option here as well. Gelo Shigeno. I mean, maybe A5 is the best, right? I'm just going to mention another idea that really strikes me here is A6, B5. Like, you just play to annihilate pawns. Use this pawn as a hook, right? To open up space on the queen side. Or you could play C6, B5, since your knight's defending D6. Similar idea. Use these as hooks to open up the side of the board with white's king on it. It seems just great for black. A5 I would associate with playing knight A6 probably. And then developing the knight to one of these squares. Sorry about the arrow. To one of these squares. Like a typical plan for black, it makes sense, especially when you're fighting over the e4 square, which here we're not necessarily fighting over. But, I mean, just with the king here, I would think trading pawns on the queen side takes precedence over this plan. Bounce back to our original miserable game. So after knight e2, black took the pawn as expected, and white blockades that pawn with bishop a3 before it goes any further. And at least trading these dark squared bishops for white is helpful because white's bishop was terrible and black's was great. So it does, you know, get black castled a smidge faster, but it's a very good trade for white. Yeah, almost gives some hope. But to me, the winning plan for black is you trade on a3, you castle, you play rook fb8, and you just plop that rook on b3, make progress with it. You know, trying to break the blockade on a3, keep pressure on c3, and then bishop b5 will chase the knight off, removing the defender of the c pawn. So, pretty simple diagrammatic win. Seems like it should just sort of gradually happen without any real opposition possible. Okay, but I should correct something from earlier. When black was winning the a pawn, I was kind of falsely under the impression that they were winning a pawn, but I forgot that they had sacked a pawn, so the material is now equal. I think I would just castle here, Oscar, and that might not be correct, but I understand you're asking, do I feel like we're close to an endgame? Do I feel like the king is so safe that it doesn't matter where it goes? And the truth is, I still think white has this move f5 in some cases, and knight f4 and maybe e6. So I would rather tuck my king over here, be prepared to always play e takes f5, never g takes f5. And part of it is like my king's not legitimately going to fight over these 3 squares, which is where I'm going to win the game. So even if the king seems safe on e7, there's no real hurry having him more centralized than on g8. We're kind of going to win this game with our pieces and the strength of that a pawn, not really with the king. It looks very hard to ever have a decisive king march this game. Even 20 moves from now. That's how I see it. Meaning that's quite likely completely wrong, but yeah. All right, let's just keep bopping around our games, huh? See what we got here. Bishop e3, h6, knight d2, a5. Bishop b5 looking for a trade, knight e5. A fancy move, but essentially if white takes on d7, it'll be an even trade. If white takes on e5, it'll be a slightly uneven trade, so that's not recommended. D takes e5 just gives black the bishop pair. For no reason, and black's light squared bishop, the unopposed one, becomes really good immediately after d5, bishop b5. So white should take on d7. So the last couple days, I've been looking at some games of Mikhail Tal. That was fun. I also made a new opening repertoire, which I may eventually publish as a course on Chess Dojo. I made the repertoire, like the PGNs, the sparring positions, the analysis, that part. But I have not yet found the model games. And the last course I did, most of the time I spent on the model games because I annotated all of them. So I found somewhere around 15, 16 GM games and annotated them, and it was whatever, between 2 and 10 hours per game to analyze and annotate them, because some of them took me like really a while to get into them. Some of them I even had to spar positions from the game to really get at to then be able to use that knowledge for the annotations. So if I want to put in a bunch of really quality model games, then I'm nowhere near finishing the course. If I just wanted to throw it up so people could start using the repertoire and just fill in model games later, I could get it up quickly, I suppose. Oh yeah, the other time also, for my last course, I did maybe 50 Caro-Kann themed puzzles. That was also a huge labor. Oh my god. Yeah, that was another 50 hours or whatever making those puzzles. So I guess I'm not very close to having a real course that I would be proud of. E4, E6, D4, D5, Knight, C3, Bishop, E7. Seems fine, ZJ. Offhand, I don't see any way for white to really take advantage of it. Like a way to try and show that your variation's not good. I don't see anything. If white plays something like knight f3, then you get to play knight f6, and e4 is not holding so well, and the position already doesn't look great for white. But if they play f4 to be able to answer knight f6 with e5 in a normal Steinitz position, if they play f4, you play d4 there, and you play d4 French where they've played f4 really early, which looks out of place. So the most obvious moves for white don't look that good. The next most obvious move is like bishop d3, which I think also is not that good, though I haven't already refuted it. The idea I have for white, ZJ, the first idea that actually seemed potentially good for white, would be after you go bishop e7 to play bishop e3. And what I'm preparing for with that move is that when you go knight f6, I'm not going to push e5, I'm going to play f3. And then your bishop e7 move might be a little too soft for you to have like an easy way to crack at my center. You know, so that has some potential for white to hold e4 and d4 and get a good development. Because imagine you played knight f6 instead of bishop e7 and white played f3. Weird move, right? You would then play bishop b4 almost certainly in one swoop to put that pressure on e4. And you're going to be trying to come very aggressively at white's position. You know, if they go bishop d3, you play d takes e4, f takes e4, queen d4 maybe. So, yeah, so bishop b4 is going to be impactful there. But having already played bishop e7, this seems plausible for white to go bishop e3, f3. If you play an extra move to play bishop b4, now I could go bishop d3, and I seem to still be holding e4 and d4 for now. And now you're getting to territory where you have to justify moving your bishop twice, and it's getting less and less likely that you'll be able to stir up an early fight that really favors you. So that's the best I can find in terms of a logical reaction to it. But it also gives me like the thought for a cool puzzle, because knight c3, bishop e7, that's already an interesting puzzle for a student, right? You ask them, what should white play? And it's already a question where they have to reason for themselves, right? And it's not obvious. Trying to figure out like what are the pluses and minuses of bishop e7, what's the most logical approach for white given that. Yeah. The other move that might be very plausible for white, in addition to bishop e3, would be bishop d3. Those are the two moves that kind of come to mind that I haven't yet refuted from black's side. Hey, Carl. Carl has a question. Is there anything about chess training that I dread or anything that never grows old? So, like stuff that I really love or really hate in training, right? Wow, you go g5 that early? That's a slam bang of a position. Wow, exciting. So currently there's pretty much nothing that I dread, Carl. I would say I have like a weakness in queen endings, and I'm not sure that I really have the skills to shore up that weakness much. And like my appetite for studying queen endgames is maybe not the highest. I just did the chapter in Van Perlo's Endgame Tactics on queen endings, and it wasn't that challenging or interesting. I definitely didn't dread it, but I feel like it didn't really cover my problem in queen endings, which is calculating positions where the king moves 17 times while being checked 17 times, and finally, through some intricate series of moves, the opponent runs out of checks, and then you get one move to advance a pawn or to reposition your queen, and then another 10 checks follows. Somehow I feel like that may be beyond my ability, and I don't know if I could ever get good at it, and I don't know how much I would enjoy trying to get better at it. Don't know how hard I would even try during a tournament game once I land in one of those positions. Between my natural mode to just switch into working really hard and the fact that I would just feel helpless and like I am just guessing the move no matter how long I think. But I don't dread studying them. Just not convinced that it'll ever help me much. So no, there's nothing that I dread, and things that never grow old is basically everything. Yeah, I'm just at a really good point in my chess right now. There was a time in my, in my 20s where I probably played better, but I don't know if I enjoyed it more. I really enjoy it now. Today I was looking at some games of Mikhail Tal's. Yesterday some games of Mikhail Tal's, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. And, that was something that I studied with great joy nearly 30 years ago and back at it. And, yeah, that's definitely never grows old. Let's look at some of these moves between Hoalong and Hinakaki, huh? Rook endgames are awesome, ZJ. You'll figure that out at some point. So we had the bishop trade on d7. And then white goes for b4. Why does black not play a4? That was her whole thing earlier, was to prevent this b4 move. But she just allows it and gets pushed at by white. Now that a pawn that falls later, well, white's already got that space advantage, which means that if white later plays this knight maneuver, that pawn's way outside of the safe zone, right? It's going to be hard to defend. You did some OTB sparring. That's super fun. Super fun. So what's black going to try? I mean, if they go into the weak square on c4, it looks like white can trade and then play rook c1, and the pawn on c4 will be lost. And if black retreats, and knight b1 to c3 looks very strong. Yeah. Looks super difficult for black. Well, black's got a ton of time again. Look at that clock. Over an hour and 30 minutes, which is the time they started with. All right, look at this. After a5, 316 did kind of what we're talking about, pushed all the kingside pawns. And now considering recapturing or maybe pushing g5, which can sometimes be even stronger. g5 looks great here, right? I mean, if the only move I see is knight e8 in response, and if g5 forces knight e8, then g5 is great. White might worry that g5, knight e8, queen h2, that bishop comes back to f5 once we've played g5. He can come here and here. So maybe g5, knight e8, you start with bishop d3. Getting on that diagonal. I mean, it doesn't really look like black's in any position to save that h5 pawn, so yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have to play g5. When you see that it sort of traps this knight on e8 for such a long time, that's just going to completely ruin black's ability to maneuver. Studying rook endgames is like a visit to the DMV. Oh my god. That's like the worst thing that's ever been said about rook endgames or almost any element of any game. I would prefer standing in line at the DMV to playing Catan, but there's very few games that I've played that I would say that about. And rook endgames are great. I guess no one's ever done rook endings in a fun way for you, CJ. Well, I could think of a really fun way for you to learn rook endgames, CJ. I could teach you some themes, and then immediately after, you'd spar against somebody who wasn't getting the lesson part. We'd have somebody standing by to spar who wasn't allowed to listen to the lesson. I'd teach you some really fancy, sexy themes that you can use in a rook ending, and then unleash you on somebody unsuspecting so they would fall into them. That would be fun, man. Right? That's like a sword fight where you've got a sword and the other person doesn't, right? They've got a piece of paper that they think is a shield, and you've got a really nice sword. Who would not enjoy that? Long think, good thing, 316. I'm glad you're thinking about this. I hope you come up with a great move. I think all 316 moves are good, actually. If I think about it, taking is a good position for white as well at this point, right? Because you could always play h6, force the bishop into h8, go after the king. Oh, it's a very nice position for white. This is convincing. This is pretty darn good, too. Someone suggested bishop h6, which is possible. I mean, there's a little risk factor in letting black win a pawn, but you probably just, bring more pieces to the king side and win. So, yeah, probably lots of good options for white. Let's see our other games here. And also just make sure there aren't any other games that have started that we didn't notice. G takes h5. Okay. Interesting. And, whoa, action over here. What is this? c5, knight d7. White goes b5, not knight b1 to c3. White goes for something to do with space, and black hits white with a tactic only made possible by b5, but I feel like Hina saw that coming, kind of laid that possibility out. Knight c5, and the point is, if pawn takes knight d4, he's going to trap this bishop. That's going to diffuse the losing position, White's main advantage was being up a pawn. Now they're not up a pawn, right? So, there you go. Technically, if we take on c5 and black plays d4, could white maybe stay up a pawn there? Nah. Yeah, bye-bye pawn, bye-bye advantage. Alvin and Rita. Bishop a3, rook a3. This is where we were at the position. We're saying black could trade and castle. Saying black could go rook b8 to b3. White brings the rook to b1. Does that stop rook b3? It does. So black trades and then tries to push the knight away. But they're not anywhere near breaking this blockade just yet. Okay, so a little work left. Let's see right here. What would I advise? Okay, to me, the logical thing to do is probably to play queen c7. Preparing rook b1, queen b1, rook b8. You leave the bishop to defend this pawn, and that means you play with your rook for the open file. Some things that I considered that didn't work as well, like here, 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 you have to calculate queen b4, and then queen sort of gets into your business. I mean, maybe it's still great. Oh yeah, because we're threatening rook e2. That actually evicts white's queen because of the threat of rook e2, king e2, bishop b5. I hadn't planned that in advance, but it's probably enough to win the game here. So now the rook is arranged on the wrong, whoops. Now the rook's arranged on the wrong side of the bishop, right? It can't get in to break white's defenses using the open file. That's an important thing to know. When you've got a position like this, the value of the B file is just tremendous. Tremendous value. So we really want to emphasize it. Okay, so that's how it goes. Alvin's knight seemingly needs to move. And not to c1, because that would allow queen f1. Yeah, Rita's time usage is great. Just making no mistake, you know, always thinking. So the knight should probably go this way. Yeah. Looks like the move to make knight g3. I don't see any knockout for black. There's still some work to do to bring this rook through, because we can't really break the blockade on this dark square. So we're going to have to use our rook on the B file or possibly on the C file, but really it should be the B file. Okay, so here white's thinking after bishop b5. gh5, knight e8 anyway. Looking to put the bishop on f6 against the move h6, I suppose. white, there's no need to rush h6. We just need this rook on d1 to go to g1. That's the crux of the position. So that means the bishop and the knight just need to get out of the way the best and the fastest they can. Is that bishop h3 or bishop d3 and then knight h3? Something like that. Bishop h3, bishop d3. I guess my inclination is bishop d3. Just taking the best diagonal with that piece right away. Then following with the knight. When the time comes, probably through h3. Well, that works, Oscar. Saves you all that labor. I'm going to be right back. I'm going to go grab, like, I don't know, maybe a chocolate chip or something to keep me up at night. All right. Knight c5. Rook c1. Interesting. I didn't see that move coming. And black just leaves the knight there. That's really brave. Oh, man. You know, that pawn on a3 is pretty weak now that the c5 pawn's gone. I mean, if I were black, I would be so satisfied and just inclined to step away. Incredible. Playing with fire. Leaving that knight on c5. I guess white can't take on c5 with the knight. White could take with the rook. White could take like this, and then maybe play knight f1. You have to take back your piece. Play knight e3. Now the rook's defending the pawn and the knight's out. But after rook d2, feels like black's got enough counterplay again. Yeah. Jeez, my mouse is not working. Now we can't move the knight because of knight b3, points out Oscar. Yeah. So we got to do something like that. Or rook c3, which never gets black to even retreat the knight, weirdly. Maybe white could play pawn f3. That threatens to take the knight. Then you can drop the bishop back. So you could play pawn f3, keep the knight out of e4. It would go back to e6 and just keep playing. But it's not like this is a super desirable move. Very confusing from the white side this game. Weird how that knight on c5, you could be worried from black side, but actually somehow from the white side it's just disorienting that they're leaving that knight on c5. I don't know how to play the position. Freezing my knight on d2. Bishop on e3 can't move. Weird. Let's see if we can't find a way to make pawn takes c5 get us like a decent position, right? So we tried here, and then we played knight f1. And after takes, rook here. f3 felt loose, but maybe it's not refuted. Let's try it. Here, knight d5 looks playable. So let's try here. King here. Rook here. Yeah, it does feel loose for white. That knight's getting chased around. Black's rooks are super active. Yeah, scary for white. If I ever go rook d1 or rook e1, I drop the c5 pawn, and otherwise, yeah, what am I doing? a3 will be weak afterwards. Okay, but let's say we try again. We allow d4, and then we try and think of a move for white here. Knight e4, knight f3. Bishop takes d4. Similar to another theme I saw earlier. The pawn dies. So it's not good for white. Okay, Holong played f3. So that definitely threatens to take the knight, and it keeps it out of e4. So it seems to me that it forces knight e6, and I think this is a very, very reasonable move for white in this position. Very, very reasonable. And there's knight e6 played. 1 second, what is this? Oh yeah, a beautiful little rain. Love it. Love it. Holong's doing fine on time, by the way. You know, black's playing really fast, so white might feel under pressure, like they're playing too slowly, but they're playing fine. Using about the right amount of time for the position here. And for how many moves in they are. So now I guess my priority would still be to bring this knight here. Black's going to be looking for the g4 break for counterplay, I think. But I don't really see a way to stop it. The two minor pieces here, they protect g5, so it's easy for black to play h5 and then g4. So we can't stop g4, so it's a little bit of a race, right? We have to find our own play as white, because black has a good play. Or, you know, possible play, something positive to do. Knight b1, knight c3, take the pawn. It feels slow, like worrisomely slow. But see the predicament of the rook on a1? This is a real problem / agony for white. This rook on a1. And I mean, you could play knight b1 and then just bring the rook out and leave the knight on b1. That would be a little bit faster, but knight on b1 obviously is not great. It's better than the rook on a1. but it's certainly not good. So the permanent solution to that, which takes a lot of time, is knight b1, knight c3, knight takes pawn, and then the knight can go to c5 or back to c3, and the a pawn can finally push. It takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moves to protect that a pawn, and then, then the rook can think about coming out. But you do win a pawn during that time, and oh gosh, h5 g4 takes 2 moves, huh? Compare to that. Let's try a variation. Okay, so black achieved h5 g4 faster than we achieved our plan. We're still 2 moves away. Need to move the knight and then the pawn. But g4, it didn't win a pawn. It just started to open up some area. Now black needs to pick something to go after. And white's up a pawn again. That's pretty reasonable for white. That said, white didn't find knight b1 before. Will they find it now? Yes! Oh my goodness. The whole reason this game became so interesting and complicated is because here white played b5 instead of knight b1, c3. At this point, black had basically no counterplay, no threats on a3. The minor piece is pretty passive. White's space is great. And they're already up a pawn, so this would be 2 pawns up. Right? Here, knight b1 was a very easy move. White played b5. I'm not sure what the point really was. If black, played a rook to f8 or ignored it or whatever, moved the knight to f6. But it had an even worse problem that black could take back their pawn. Now, in a much tougher situation, white finds knight b1, but I guess they've been thinking more and they got deeper into the position and they found, the crux of the position, and they came up with it. Honestly, I didn't find anything else very good for white. Sometimes when there's only one good thing, it helps you to find that one good thing. Sometimes not. Sometimes it's just confusing, and the one good variation is a not obvious concrete sequence of moves. Hi, Nickel Alloy. How are you? I think like a knight maneuver where you retreat your knight to the first rank. Really advanced players might all have done it by now, but for some people, that's like a lifetime achievement to unlock like a very good retreating knight maneuver. Personally, it took me a long time to get comfortable with knights. It's been like my worst chess piece my entire career, pretty much. My opponent's knights would suddenly pop up on squares I didn't see coming. And I don't just mean like blundering forks, when I was really bad at calculating. I mean sort of positionally. I didn't know where to put my knights. I would go on a maneuver that was too slow, or I wouldn't see my opponent's maneuver coming, or I wouldn't see some little pawn move that changed what was or wasn't a good square for a knight. You know how the knights, like, they depend a lot on the pawns to kind of set up their squares? Like sometimes in this King's Indian kind of structure here, you have to play a5 so you can put your knight on c5. And there's this whole play between the a pawns that happens, and all this play is around black being able to set up a knight on c5 or not, right? So I just always found knights really tricky, and I found this one amazing maneuver in the Benoni. When I say I found it, like I read about it, I saw it in an example. There's a maneuver in the Benoni that's very, very good in a certain kind of Benoni, which is like ef5, gf5 kind of position, right? Where you can maneuver the knight through h8, and it's super good. And eventually, once in my life, I got to play that knight h8 maneuver in an actual tournament game with that actual structure, and won the game. And I got to play knight h8 really quickly, you know, and I saw it coming and all. And I mean, not like I blitz out moves trying to seem like I'm better than I am so much, but, you know, I didn't have to spend a ton of time. I didn't have to invent it. I saw it coming. I was able to, you know, do some mild calculations around it and played the maneuver pretty quickly. And super fun. That was like unlocking a lifetime achievement to play like a knight through the corner maneuver. And through the corner is even more rare than against, like, you know, against the side or along the back rank. Sorry, chess.com's my mouse or whatever, my computer can't handle the highlights and stuff. But this through b1 is already good, right? So we get b6, knight c3, bishop f6, rook d1, h5, and grabs the pawn, and g4. Wow, we predicted what black would go for. Predicted everything here. White could just bring the knight back to c3. That's pretty good. White could also go for knight b2 to d3. Be kind of fancy about it. That doesn't seem helpful. You could throw in rook c1, king b7. That also doesn't seem super helpful. Unless rook c6 is somehow annoying for black. Yeah, knights are super tricky, ZJ. And, you know, I was finally, you know, I spent a couple of years working very, very slowly through about a third or maybe a half of Averbach's book on knight endgames. And I feel like that's finally making my play with the knight in the middle game and elsewhere better. You know, Nickel Alloy, I would have thought that I could beat Leela or Stockfish with rook odds, except I recently heard that Hikaru... Right? That Hikaru lost? So that tells me that I can't. That calibrates my answer. Is the sacrifice on b6 bad? Yep. But I do think in classical chess I could beat Leela or Stockfish with rook odds. I hope I'm not wrong about that. I mean, I'd like to think I could beat a computer at knight odds in classical. Risky choice from white. I understand your opponent wants to open an area, you want to close it, but that gives up the light squares. It blocks our bishop. Huh. Does that sound? If bishop here, you go g3. Maybe black just plays h4, anticipating when you go g3, they'll be able to open up white's king a little bit more. We could also see knight g7. Yeah, that's a perfectly reasonable maneuver right here. Knight g7 to f5. It's just, yeah, you take the pressure off of f4. If you tag f4 at some point, that could be worth something. One of the few moves that Hinakaki finds tricky and crucial enough to put some real time into right here. props to Ho Along on this knight b1, knight c3, knight a4. That was great. You want to sack an exchange on e3 somehow. Oh, you mean if white defends it and you go rook e8 or something? I mean, I think if you put your knight on f5, the bishop's going to have to drop back to f2. So I don't see how you would ever do an exchange sack then. And it can drop back to f2 because you won't be threatening the f-pawn at all with your knight on f5, right? Instead, Hinekaki immediately threatens the pawn. So if g3, she might play h4. The bishop's in the way of knight g7, so that's clearly not her priority right here. Okay, Ho Along throws in rook c1, which I don't like, because after king b7, I don't really see the point. It just kind of lines you up for rook to a8 at some point. But the king comes into the center, which is odd. She wants to defend the knight and keep the king centralized. The thing is, this is a little bit weak, so now knight c3 becomes better. I guess the king will just keep coming up or something. Crazy stuff. Okay, well, I think either way, white's going to need to play g3 with or without knight c3. I guess I would play knight c3 first here. And then after king d6, play g3. And we're going to glance at the other games. I know a lot of action in 316's game. In fact, 316 has already won the game. Wow, that happened relatively fast. Let's just check on it. So here was queen g2. Not quite what I would have prioritized with those minor pieces getting out of the way, but then comes knight h3. And queen f6 walks into h6. Brilliant move from 316. Black thought they had h6 covered here with queen f6, so they were trying to prevent pawn h6. But I think correct would be something like rook g8, right? Because white put a queen here instead of a rook. So then you just say, let me defend this file here and, you know, keep white from making any threats like that. Hey, Oxycids. In my experience, pretty much all players over 2,000 know the board and the notation and all that. They can't all play blindfold well, but most of them can play blindfold okay. Have you been playing for a short time or a long time? I have a feeling like if you don't know the chess notation, you've been playing for a short time and you're some kind of a savant or genius. No, okay, you've played 5 years. That's a reasonable amount of time to get to 2100. But it's a long time to not have learned the notation, and you do know the chess notation, just not blindfolded. Okay. So Oxycids, if I told you blindfolded, if I just told you a single square, I didn't ask you to keep track of all the pieces, but I told you a single square, can you imagine like a knight or a bishop on c5 on an empty board? Do you know where c5 is? Like how close or far it is from the center or whatever? Could you tell me, like, you know what squares a bishop on c5 can attack or a knight? Great, you've got it. It's the square for the Sicilian. Perfect. Yeah. So that's why I would have been really shocked if someone after 5 years didn't know the squares, Oxycids, because normally every square on the chessboard has a story about it, right? Like e4, best by test Fischer, right? e4 is also the square where after e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6, and the Petrov black counterattacks your undefended e4 pawn, right? F7 has certain stories associated with it, right? Like the Scholars Mate of queen h5, bishop c4, queen f7, but also like the two knights defense, knight f3, bishop c4, knight g5, right? Or the fried liver when black plays d5 and white sacks the knight on f7 at some point. Like every square on the board should have some stories to it. And once you've played for a few years, you've seen a bunch of those stories, right? You might not remember all of them, but you start to know, bishop b5 is a square from which you can check a king on e8 or something like that, right? So you start to know a bishop on b3 or c4 is going to be on the diagonal that leads to that f7 square, right? So basically, over time, you should have an idea what's going on in these different squares, the way you said c5 is the Sicilian square. Then an important question, I think, to consider before deciding whether or not you can play blindfold or how to learn to play blindfold, which you don't need to be able to do. But an important question is, do you see images in your head? Because a lot of people don't really visualize. I'm finding that there's a decent number of people who, like me, don't really see anything in their head. So then you'd have to keep track of where things are in a different way. Some people can just picture a full chessboard in their head, 16 white pieces, 16 black pieces on the starting squares, and then they can just move, d4, d5, c4, e6, queen's gambit. They just see the whole thing. So ZJ can only keep track of a certain part of the board at a time. You can't see everything, right? And that's also, by the way, what Kostya said, ZJ, was that oh, Alvin, did your game just finish with Rowdy Rita? Yeah. All right. So yeah, so Kostya said that he basically can look at he has good visualization ability, but the full board is like too much to sort of be watching and taking in as a picture at all times. So he has what he said is kind of like a flashlight. He can move around the board and look at like one area at a time, and it's there for him, but he's not seeing the full thing all at once. Anyway, Oxycids, I think that not playing blindfold chess would not be something that's holding you back from continuing to progress or improve as a player, right? It wouldn't keep you from getting to 2200 and 2300 if you can't play blindfold. Blindfold can be like a cool thing to do. Most good players are able to do it to some kind of a level, but it's not a requirement. And if you want to be able to play blindfold, I know that you could learn it. If you have some real interest in learning blindfold, you could learn it. But if you just want to keep getting better at chess, it's not something you need to do. Yeah, nickel alloy. So there's all kinds of levels of visualization. Some people see super crystal clear. Some people see little bits and bobs. Some people see it, but it's kind of blurry. If you can visualize, but it's blurry and unclear, you can probably get a little bit better at it and use visualization to play blindfold if you want. I actually love to play blindfold, actually with my eyes closed and just totally relaxed body-wise and just keeping track of the chess game. I find that to be super relaxing. I did this one blindfold simul while I was in France last year, where I went to a local high school and I played, I don't know, just 5 or 6 kids who were semi-beginners, and somebody was making the moves for me who was competent with notation, and I just got to sit there and I didn't have to run around the boards in a circle. The week before, I'd given a simul to everybody who wanted to at the high school, which was 50 boards and running 5 miles around the boards. And the next week I went back and just played the best people, so to speak. And it was just so peaceful to just sit there and not have to do anything except occasionally say knight f3, pawn to c4. So chill. I felt really, really good thereafter. Howdy, Rita. Well played game by you, I think. I do that too, ZJ. When I play blindfold, I do it based on notation, and I often have to go back through it again to remember when was the last time that piece moved? When was the last time that piece moved? Ah, so that's where it must still be. Yeah. Yeah, I can't hold a position either because I don't visualize, so I just do it by keeping track of where the pieces are, and when I forget, I go back through the notation, which I remember quite well. Okay, so black seems to have h6 covered. White plays h6 anyway because they, even giving black the pawn with check, white has a counter in mind, which is knight g5, and black can't go after the knight with rook g8 or anything because it uncovers the rook's attack. So this is a very, very nice sequence for someone at 1700 level to come up with this thing here. I really like it. Queen g6 came in, and now knight h7 going for the queen trade by hitting the rook. Not a lot of choice for black in the matter. And I guess black just resigned here, which is a little bit early, right? Yeah, it's a little bit early to resign. But I guess black's actually dead if you think about it for a moment. It's like a move or two early to resign to my taste normally. So the rook needs to move somewhere where the knight can't get it, right? So you can't go rook g8 or rook f7 where the knight's going to hunt you down with a check, a hidden or discovered check, right? So the rook wants to go somewhere like f4 or whatever. And then I think the issue is white puts this rook here to start cutting the king off. No, the king can try and run, huh? That's not completely winning either. Yeah, this is really early to be resigning. Oh gosh, here there's knight f6, knight h5 catching that rook. So even here the rook didn't get away. And if the rook goes here, then the move h3 will win. Because you can take and knight f6 check, knight takes here. Wow, okay, it's really not obvious that black's lost here. But I guess black was a 2000 and they couldn't find any move that seemed to even keep the game going, and they stopped. I have not seen the exhibition where Magnus played blindfolded against 3 people at once. Okay, so that was very nice from 316. Wow, and like suddenly black's just dead on move 20. Equal material on the board and all, right? Fantastic. Fantastic achievement for 316. That's got to feel good. Then let's see the conclusion of this game that we've been watching before. Notice the black king didn't really come out to finish it off. How did this one go? We were here at bishop b5. Knight moved away. Yeah, and black's not really doing anything. So it's not that easy, right? The bishop got in the way of the rook. Black got the pieces mixed up for a moment here. But white goes into this endgame and black takes an open file. So this is really, I think Alvin's playing another game now. On to the next game probably. But whether you hear it now or later at some point, Alvin, this queen b4 move is kind of like suicide. I guess you're feeling you can't do anything because the queen and bishop are cutting off your knight, so you want to do something. But it's true, you can't do anything. You just have to wait. You just have to wait. Let your opponent find a way to win, you know, prove that they can do something. So you just have to shuffle. You use something like king e3, king f2, whatever. Especially when your opponent played a move that threatens nothing. You have to just sit there. But this is going to be suicidal, this switch in the position. Now that rook can come to c4 or c2. It came to c2. And then just queening, yeah. So that was suicide. I mean, you see how quickly black wins after the queen trade, right? It's like 2 moves. Rook c8, c2, and white can resign. They're down a queen. So, yeah. So, suicide. Queen b4 is suicide. see if we got any other games here. You miscounted the squares and you thought you could queen at the same time. But you know, this situation was hopeless with or without that exact queening scenario, you know? Like right here, if taking on e2 doesn't queen first for black, Alvin, black could play rook b2, rook takes b4, and win gradually like that. Black could play a3 here, just queen the pawn, and if you ever take the pawn, then they go up a knight. Black's winning any which way after you trade the queen here. Yeah, I see. I've found 7 different methods already to win for black. So, right, a3 wins, rook b2 wins. All right, Rowdy Rita. Thank you for your trust or faith, such as it was, right? That you went for a task that you were skeptical of. I appreciate that. I mean, we try hard to earn your trust. It's a super cool task. Is it critical? You know, could you make it to the next level without ever doing the memorize a game task? Probably. But, you know, you could probably make it to almost any level skipping almost any task other than playing the classical games. And, you know, I think getting a little bit of like different stuff, trying out different things, getting some taste of chess culture. You never know what's going to spark somebody's, you know, excitement and passion and interest. So it's good to have a little bit of variety in there. Exactly. Having a few like really cool games that you can bust out just makes you more popular in the chess world, right? I mean, like it might help you to make friends with somebody who then becomes the training partner who pushes you up 300 points, right? And then you'd be like, oh, there was literally nothing I ever did that helped my chess more than the time I memorized that game because it led to et cetera, right? Or similar, Rita, it can be cool to have like 1 or 2 endgame studies or tactical puzzles, you know, that's like something really special, you know, that at some point you're sitting around with your friends, maybe in a pub, because I know you're in England, or because I think you're in England, you know, and then, you know, people are talking, you're like, hey, have you guys ever seen this? And you set up a board and, you know, oh, it's great. Does the dojo have an apprenticeship program? Not formally, Alvin, no. Tell me what you're thinking of. And how are you doing, Scotty? So this is the one live game I see right now. I might be missing stuff, but let's see what's happening in our live game. Oh, the black rook got into a3. So we were here. Knight c3, rook f5, g3, bishop h6. That's weird. After that, pawn's super solidly defended, and this bishop seems to be doing more here. Knight moves away. Knight d3 takes. Knight e5 check. Yep. King moves away. So white dropped this pawn on a3, but now they're going to get the a file back potentially if they trade rooks. It could come out well for white again. That's so weird. The ebb and flow of things. You know, rook takes, bishop takes, rook a1, rook a8, knight c6. So white's going to be very close to building a mating net around the black king. You're doing great. That's good to hear. Yeah, I'm doing great too, Scotty. A little bit tired tonight, but yeah, overall things are good. A member being a student of another member. Yeah, we have that, Alvin. You know, there's like a task in the dojo that you need to have a certain number of your games reviewed by players in a cohort above you. And you have to review a certain number of games of players in the cohorts below you. So we have that element where everybody's supposed to be shepherding somebody a couple cohorts below them, and getting some advice from players a couple cohorts above them. In addition to that, we have a few people who are like official Chess Dojo coaches who are recommended by us as people you can get private lessons from who know the program to some extent, right? Yeah, I think you would just send them a message on some form, you know, on their chess.com account or their Elite Chess account or their Discord or something. Do I can recall or say the notation of the Morphe opera game from memory? Sure. Easy, ZJ. Easy. That's like the most memorized game in the world, other than maybe Scholar's Mate. I know that one. E4, E5, Knight F3, D6, D4, Bishop G4, DE5, Bishop F3, Queen F3, DE5, Bishop C4, Knight F6, Queen B3, Queen E7, Knight C3, C6, Castles Queenside B5, Knight B5, CB5, Bishop B5, check, Knight BD7, Rook D7, Knight D7, Rook D1, Rook D8. Wait a minute. The Queen was still on E7. I skipped Bishop G5, sorry. I was going very fast. Bishop C4, Knight F6, Queen B3, Queen E7, Knight C3, C6, Bishop G5, B5, Knight takes, Pawn takes, Bishop takes, Knight BD7, Castles Queenside, Queen E6, Rook D7, Knight D7, Rook D1, Rook D8. Whoa. That's loud. No, I got it wrong though somehow. Alright, I have to slow down then. Bishop B5 check, Knight BD7, Castles Queenside. Maybe Rook D8. Yeah, it's Rook D8 first, then Rook D7, Rook D7, Rook D1, Queen E6. Bishop D7, Knight D7, Queen B8, Knight B8, Rook D8, mate. You got another player? You got a game against a titled player, Alvin. That's great. The opera game is one of the best games for teaching beginners. Yeah, super cool game. Super cool game. It's both like crystal clear and super flashy at the same time, right? Like it's very, very clear on like the principles it's teaching you. The story's not so complicated. At the same time, it's like mind-boggling and beautiful. And often like beautiful games are a little too complicated to teach beginners, right? Super flashy games will have like too much calculation or the themes will be too complicated. There's nothing muddled about the opera game, right? It's like a salad with 3 really fresh ingredients. Thoughts on Hans making the Vegas finals? Hans is really good, Neko Koneko, right? He's good at chess. He's good at rapid chess. He's good at blitz chess. He's good at Fischer Random chess. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's still a little bit of a surprise or an upset, right? It's a big result for him. It's a big progress to do that well when there's so many top 10 players in the world at the event. But yeah, I don't know. Ask Jesse what he thinks of it. Jesse's the one who didn't think that Hans could even make it into the top 10. No, I have not seen the movie Critical Thinking. I don't think so. I probably know like 20 chess games by heart, maybe. but maybe 2,000 songs. It's weird, right? I'm a chess player, but... Okay, after long thought, white plays this complicated line, leaving the bishop on e3 hanging. Wow. Oh, that sounds fun, ZJ. So, I mean, to me, this move looks really good that white didn't go for. Let me show you all what I'm thinking here, here. Then I want to go here. The bishop will come. And I really want to make this work. But it's tricky, right? And we go here. Knight here. And we can't quite get this knight c6 mating net. Yeah. So I might have to play rook a4 and defend the pawn. But I still feel like this is what I would do as white. Let's see how rook c6 plays out, though. It's interesting. Bishop d6. Protecting the knight. Now the bishop drops back. Rook a2. Yeah, see, this black rook is so good. White should have traded it. I'm going to be unequivocal about this. Okay, folks? Look at this position here. Do you see how good this rook on a3 is? We're basically avoiding a trade. But our rooks are not better than black's rook on a2. Maybe our rooks are better than the rook on f5. But that would be even more clear if we traded the rook, the a rook. So this is a huge mistake in terms of whose piece is better, right? Who should be happy to get this trade? Who should embrace it? Whose piece is better? Big mistake here. The problem, Carl, was that bishop takes d4 for black came with check. White's king was on g1. And after the king moves, black can take the knight on e5. So it all kinds of falls apart. And I was thinking, you know, not to get too deep into the variation, but I was thinking of playing king g2, threatening to trade without it being check. King g2 gives black time to play a move like c6 or c5, and their king will never be in a mating net. Is white okay in that position? Yes, white's okay, but they're not winning like I wanted to win. It's really weird how few chess games I remember, given how much time I spend with chess and how many I used to remember. Let's test my memory. Here's a game I studied yesterday. Let's see if I can play out a game that I studied yesterday. I should be able to after one day, I would think. Morgan Falk v. Gates. Okay, this is Tal against Semyon Furman when Tal was a teenager. I know it's a classical Sicilian. Richter Browser attack. I didn't study every move, though. You know, like I glossed over some moves that looked like normal moves. But this, I remember this moment here, I thought, oh, maybe black should have traded because of knight f3, but then I looked at it and trading wasn't that great either. Knight f3, maybe going for e5. b5. Bishop f6. Queen didn't take because of e5 with the bishop undefended, so black plays g takes. f5 immediately engaging with the light squares. Queen a5, king b1. Semyon was feeling aggressive here. He threatens rook takes c3. Gets chased away. Knight comes back. Knight d4. Taking the sting out of b4. Black just traded in the game and then defended the f6 pawn before playing like rook b8 to re-threaten b4. Develops, gets worried about bishop h5, gets the king off the diagonal. Rook f1. Rook b8 to play b4. Fe, fe. Fireworks start. Enter Mikhail Tal. Rook f6. b4 attacking the knight. A move that Furman might have missed. Rook f5. Holy moly. e5. Every piece still hanging. Queen a7. Queen b6 to defend the rook. Trades. Gets the knight out of dodge. Rook gets taken. Knight b6, bishop e4 is unclear. So even at the end, after seemingly saving all his pieces, Tal decides to sack the exchange here. And he's threatening to win the full rook, so it has to move, which allows f6, trapping these pieces here. Pawn takes b4. Black is lost. What did Black do here? Maybe king d7. g4. Rook g8, trying to stop it. h4. h6. Rook g1, just continuing the plan. King e6. Bishop c4 is losing. The king has nowhere to go. Right? It can't go forward. It's just trapped on that diagonal with the rook hanging. So Black prepares a square for the king. g5. Takes. Takes. King here. Bishop c4. King e5. g6. Threatening g7. Bishop tries to get out of the way. Knight e7. Attacking the rook with two pieces. So like king f6, knight g8 check. Right? Would win too much. Here I'm not 100% sure where the rook moved, but I'm going to say rook d8. I guess there's like a small chance it could have gone to e8 as well. Would have been about the same. Wait, this allows knight here. I guess then he would play king f6, lose a rook, and blockade the pawn. I didn't even notice that because I think the game ends with g7 and Black resigns. But I didn't even notice that White had knight c6 in the final position. I'm pretty sure that's where the pieces are. I mean, rook c8 doesn't look like a great move for Black, which would be the move that would stop that. I think that's right. I think I got it. Yeah. So I can remember things for a day or two still. But I don't walk around with hundreds of games in my head like when I was a kid. Rook c1. Maybe White's belatedly realizing this piece is annoying and wants to go rook c2. Right, to cut it off. Black engages in the traitoroo. Now tucks the king into that death trap. White plays here, but hang on. Isn't there this now? Bishop here and then here. I guess the king gets back out to d7. There's no loss involved, but okay. I mean, it's still the a file. We're going to go there at some point, no? And we've got a tense game on our hands here, folks. And there should be another new game going on here between Alvin and a FIDE master, Isuru Alahakun. See where Isuru is from. Cameroon? Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka. The flag's really small. I can hardly see it. Sri Lanka, FIDE master. All right. Thank you for playing with us, FIDE master. Hey, Surfing Venice. Greetings to you. Let's see the first couple moves of this game. It looks like it's a Sicilian with a knight trade on c6. Yep, Sicilian, knight trade on c6, e5, and white to play. So white's got a little bit of tempo here, right? They've got the bishop out already, and castle's played, and it's white's move. That tells me white should be ahead 2.5 tempi here. Let's just confirm that. Little exercise. How many moves does it take for the black rooks to see each other versus the white rooks? Right? So for white, it's 1, 2, 3 moves. For black, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moves. Plus it's white's turn right now. So 2.5 tempi lead for white. This early on, that's a good chunk of development lead. You could maybe do something significant with that much development. And Albin chooses to play the most aggressive move to open up the game and make use of that development and get the rook firing at the same time. It does give black this move bishop c5 check to bring out a piece with tempo. So in a sense, it gives back one of white's extra tempi. But, you know, to make progress, you always have to spend your tempi on something, right? So white's looking to spend, you know, 1 or 2 tempi on capturing this pawn and opening this file. Okay, black prepares for fe, bishop check, knight g4. That's kind of their dream here. Let me just say, another option for white, very positional option, I guess, would be something like knight d2, knight c4, bishop e3. Hitting this square and this square. Sorry about this. Hitting those squares, you can play a4, a5 as well if you want to solidify some of that. Put some pressure on the opponent just with pieces. That's the main alternative I see as a plan for white other than f4 here. If you played queen e2, rook d1 quickly, black's queen goes to c7. She looks okay there. Yeah. All right, so we'll see an f4 game here. Fe, bishop check, king h1, knight g4, queen f3, knight e5. That doesn't seem to go anywhere for white. Did you play rook f7? No. Pawn to e6? No. Fe doesn't look very powerful to me. Maybe just f5, just gaining some kingside space. I mean, you spend your entire development lead on it, basically. But then you've got a big space advantage on the king side. Or could we now develop this knight, like head to f3 with the knight, put pressure on e5 that way? through the opening? Sure. So it's an e6 Sicilian, ZJ. Open Sicilian. Takes, a6. I don't know what a6 is called, but you know, some kind of modern Sicilian. On this bishop d3 move order, that's been known since I was a kid that this move would be played if you wanted to maybe just trade on c6. So that's how we get here. And then there's an idea for white to grab this space with e5. And black's got, you know, every pawn on a light square, so black evens out their light square and dark square control, but gives another tempo here to switch to like a double king pawn type position. 2.5 tempi for white, right? And we're struggling to prove exactly what Alvin can do with it. Yeah, I mean, I bet it's theory. You know, like still like a heavily theoretical position, but I just don't know that much. So I'm just using principles to try and guess or figure out what white should be doing. All right. Looked it up. And yeah, I'm right that the best we can do is just grab a bunch of space here. There's no profitable way to try and win this e5 square. Against bishop c5, knight g4, black's always gonna be fine. So it's an important thing to understand about time in chess, right? When you have extra time, you're always going to trade it for something, right? You can try and spend your time to create a positional advantage. You can try and spend your time to open up the game in order to blow up your opponent because you're ahead in development. But let's say you're ahead 2 tempi and it takes 2 tempi to blow up the position. Once you've blown up the position and spent all your time opening the position, your opponent might be equal in development, right? And then it's no longer an advantage. All right, h3. So this move is designed to play fe5 still and keep the knight off of g4. But I think black could check and castle if they want to and answer fe5 with knight d7 looks playable. They could also, well, no, I wouldn't recommend bishop e6. That anchors you nicely against fe5, knight d7, terrible for white, but it gives white f5 with tempo, so that's not good. So the moves that make sense for black are bishop c5, check followed by castling, I think. And black plays bishop c5. Anyway, if white after knight f6 played f5, they would have taken their 2.5 tempi lead in development and turned it into a nice kingside space advantage where black has to really think twice about ever castling on that side of the board. And so that's something. That's just the trade-off. There's not a good, like, strategically you'd want to open the game to use your development lead. But there's no great way to force the game open in a positive way for white. Therefore, they have to content themselves with getting, you know, a space advantage. Trading their time for a space advantage. Some people trade their time for a space advantage before they even have a development lead, right? like see queen pawn openings with d4 and c4, right? White spends their time building a space advantage at the cost of getting behind in development, right? Not even using a time advantage that they already have. I mean, technically they've got half a tempo at the start. But when you see somebody play d4, c4, d4, knight f6, c4, they've already given black a half tempo development lead in order to stake out space. Okay, let's pop to our other game for a moment. Back and forth. All right, so white centralizes the... Oh, at least plays rook a2 before black takes the file with rook a8. Very good. So Ho Along is like learning while playing the game. Do you see that, folks? And this is one of the reasons why we say that playing classical games is such a critical component of improving at chess. Not only can you learn from studying the games, but you can learn during the game, right? And this time does not let that black rook take over the remaining file. Centralizes the king, moves the bishop. White's slowly getting better here. Partly because black's not willing to just pull the trigger on this trade and leave white with the bishop. Nor is black going rook a8 to trade rooks and try to grovel. And the longer they wait, the worse it's getting because white's king is centralizing and the knight's going to be able to attack something like h5 or d5 after a rook trade. So it's getting a little bit worse for black here over time. Knight g6, hg3. Holy... Hinakaki is like quick with like the wild creative sacking moves. So the idea is against knight takes rook to take here, threatening to queen, rook here, and then maybe take back or maybe just g3, g2, h1, completely ignoring that knight. And yeah, I don't see any way to stop those pawns. So that makes knight g6 a not very useful move for white here. More useful might have been, you know, to leave the knight where it's attacking this hanging pawn here, right? Maybe g takes h4. Then you're up a pawn. Bishop's defending this. Knight's threatening this. Yeah, so this knight g6 move turns out not to be good. I think h takes g3 from Hinakaki was a surprise for Ho Along. But as I was saying, Ho Along is learning along the way in this game, right? Because now they're going to know in future games when they're thinking of like attacking a rook, they're going to take into account like, oh, what if they, you know, just start taking with the pawn through the pawn structure, getting close to queening. That'll be a consideration. You know, once you've seen this pattern, right, we learn from playing our opponents because in any given game, an opponent who's on average at our level is going to have a few ideas we don't, and they're going to teach us a couple things. They don't even have to be better than us to teach us a couple things, right? Because there are going to be some things that they see that we don't see and some things we see that they don't see. So just playing classical games, you get better. And when you get to play somebody like better than you, they're going to show you even more things, right? So, okay, rook moves here. It's probably wanting to get to an open file of its own, right? Since white's got the only one at the moment. Bishop here. Now black finally busts out the space on the queen side, gets the knight back into the game. Yeah, white's got a chance here to go rook h2, take that open file since black prioritized c6. Knight b4 check is a threat from black, so that's another reason to go rook h2 here. You know, one of my first thoughts here was maybe knight e5, trying to get back to a good square, attack g4, probably force a trade, but knight e5, black could take with the bishop, right? And then play knight b4 check and take here. So knight e5 is definitely not possible. Rook h2 looks like the only plausible move to me here. It's the only move that I would truly consider. Bishop a3. That stops knight b4, and that was a bad piece on c1. Not a bad move. I didn't really see it coming, but not a bad move at all. Black goes after the knight. Again, a confusing move. Hinakaki playing a lot of moves that are, when I say confusing, this one's confusing for white, right? It's like hard to figure out what you want to do. Right? You don't know if you want to trade on d6 or save the knight, how to evaluate these trades. Ho-Along has not been crystal clear throughout this game on which trades were good for them and which trades were good for black. So this move is going to provide some strategic confusion. But Ho-Along has managed their time very well. They've got plenty of time to reflect on this and to play out the resulting endgame. They're not really under terrible pressure because they've been playing slow enough to play good moves and fast enough to keep time on the clock. So knight e5, that makes good sense to me. If the bishop takes on e5, white will have to take with the d pawn. White won't want to play like fe, rook f3 or something like that. That feels too active for black. Black retreats the knight, still playing so complicated, sacking this pawn, but there's always going to be rook g6 to g3, they're thinking. Man, oh man. And is that accurate and sound? I guess it is. White can't take that pawn yet. So I guess the best white could do is trade on d6 and then bring the rook to h2 or something. That knight's headed to f5. Maybe bishop d6, rook d6, weird move, rook g2, passively defending g3 in advance. We got to move from Ho-Along, goes for the trade, goes for the open file. I think that's probably right, but I'm just going to show you a weird move that occurred to me, rook g2. Defending this to threaten knight takes g4. There's no rook g6 to stop it. So black probably just continues this way. We take and then get hit here. Knight e3. Black's got to take here, I think. Trade, trade, knight here. So should black be able to hold this knight and pawn ending? Probably, but I can't guarantee it. It's about as good a position as white should be able to get, right? Just a pawn up. So the rook g2 move, pretty strong. There's no obviously sufficient response for black. The knight's going to come through g4 against any moves black does to try and get active. It's going to come through g4 and then settle on e3, from which it'll pressure d5 and prepare to start advancing these pawns. So, yeah, I think the variation I gave might be the best black has to try and hold, and it's certainly playable / promising for white. That's weird. Normally, you wouldn't even look at rook g2. It's very antithetical to what good chess moves look like. But I guess if you consider the g-pawn's already dead, right? If you consider that pawn's already dead, then this move doesn't look as dumb because, you know, backing up your g-pawn and or your f-pawn would be really logical. Yeah, okay. Take this pawn off the board in your mind on g4 and then think of what moves make sense for white. Pawn to g4 would make the most sense for white, right? But something like rook g2 or rook f2 would sometimes be right instead of rook h2 if you knew those were already passed pawns. So given that the g-pawn's kind of dead, but black's coming with knight f5, it makes sense. Rook g2 might even be white's best move. It might even be better than rook h2. Wow, I don't even know why I even thought of that move. Normally I never play moves like that. All right, but let's focus on the move we have on the board. There's kind of a threat of rook h7. I would expect very quickly knight f5 from Hinakaki, but they have stopped and are thinking about this move. So that's mildly surprising. What's going on with this move? Seems like the knight will just head straight to g3 from there. Should be okay for black. In addition, I don't see anything else to do, right? If you let white play rook h7, rook g7, then take the g-pawn, that's a bad position for black. So once again, I don't see an alternative to knight f5. I mean, yes, I see black could play a move like b5, rook here, rook e6. White has no way to immediately win the knight. White can take the pawn. Black can claim there's some counterplay with b4, but white's king is so close. You know, knight comes to e3. It's definitely inferior. All right, knight f5 has been played. What was Hoalong's plan against this? Because you should have seen knight f5 coming, I'm going to say, as white. You should have seen it coming. As soon as black played knight e7, I mean, you have to see that this is what they've got in mind and have something in mind against it yourself, right? The point of knowing what your opponent is wanting to do is that you can come up with something relevant, right? All right, we'll leave Hoalong on this for a moment. Click back and forth to our other game. So we had h3 check, king here, knight g4 anyway. So Isuru goes crazy, blood in his eyes with this violent move, which I completely don't believe in. Queen f3 from Alvin makes sense, covering those squares. But oddly, queen e2 might be a better square for the queen, actually, just so that with h5, you could sometimes take without getting check and losing your queen, right? You see what I mean? Like hg, hg. You could be better off with the queen on e2. Developed a piece. This piece came this way. And now white's sort of dropping a pawn. Very passive maneuver there. Knight g4 I completely don't believe. Queen e2 looked right. Queen f3 shouldn't be so bad. h5, what to do now? Developing makes sense, but that square's always lame. Black's threatening nothing, so white can do almost anything, but this knight d1, ugh. Yeah, it feels like knight a3 to c4, knight d2 to c4, knight c3 to e2. Yeah, it's just not that useful. I mean, you could even just go bishop d2 and bring out a new piece. Black's threatening nothing, but white comes straight, and you see black's playing that kind of move, bishop d7, right? Threatening nothing, just like I said, bishop d2 for white. White comes straight into this move that just lets the dangly knight take your dark squares from you, which are already, your dark squares are already slightly worse, right? With all these pawns on light squares. Left with that terrible bishop on d3. Black takes on f4 and is up a pawn. Oof. So that knight d1, bishop e3 plan, that unfortunately did not work at all for Alvin. Now, it is hard to find the approach for white here. That I agree with. You could definitely take a long time to try and find a good move. Alvin may have been unhappy with what he came up with, but not come up with anything better. And I've been in situations like this before, and I know what my opponent's doing doesn't look that great, but I don't see how to sort of cut the Gordian knot. I don't see how to get a good position. So let's see if we can find one good continuation for Alvin, right, as a lesson on how to approach this position. So basically, knight c3 is, the knight's going to be badly placed. So we're only playing knight c3 if we see some great route for it to go to thereafter. I don't. So I'd like some other way to use this knight. I want to go to c4. That's a normal square, and knight d2 is the normal way to develop it. Again, better with the queen on e2, perhaps. So let's try knight d2. That's the move we'd like to play. So let's try it. Is knight e3 a problem in response? We could go rook e1. It doesn't seem to matter, right? Oh, then maybe bishop g4. All right, let's double check this, right? It's unfortunate queen placement has got us a little bit mixed up, but let's just see if we can't get around it. h4, queen f2, knight c2, queen takes, knight e1. Bishop c4. Queen d1 now. Messy. That was a little bit annoying to deal with. Problematic. Knight e3. A little problemitsky. Yeah, not pumped about that. All right, what if I now try fe5? Point is against knight e5. What's the h-pawn doing, right? Now I go queen g3. Hitting here and here. Jeez, it'd be so nice if these things worked. The arrows and highlights, I mean. So queen g3 hitting these two squares, and looks like white's fine, and that h5 move is just kind of doing nothing out there. What else might black like to do? Queen h4 like in the game, maybe. I'll just develop. Black can basically take a draw here. I don't really see how to prevent that. So maybe I'll allow that. That's not the end of the world for white at this point. So okay, black's got one chance to make a perpetual, otherwise they're doing nothing here. That seems fine for white, so that's a decent solution, fe5. Does that make sense? Alvin, I wanted to go knight d2, knight c4. But knight d2, knight e3, rook e1, bishop g4 was not working, right? Oh, thanks, Jan. I remember, like, I was threatening something and then I forgot it in the follow-up. Here. Does this give us chances to come out ahead? Yes, queen g7 winning. Queen g7 winning. Threatening queen h8 and bishop g5. So by now, a move like knight f2, we can sack the rook. Oh, but hang on. This move's complicated. Luckily, this move's mate, even without the queen there. Is it mate? No, it's not mate. Yes, it's mate. Okay. So that's winning for white. Okay, so let's go back through the thought process for Alvin, right? So first, I'd like to develop this knight. I can't get it to any good square. The only square I really see is c4, which would put some pressure here and maybe even come to e3 and just trade some pieces. But knight d2, knight e3 was a problem. Knight a3, b5. Sorry, what's wrong? Why can't I make moves? h5. Knight a3 to come to c4. I didn't talk about it. It's like knight d2, but it doesn't allow knight e3. But after b5, we don't have the move a4 to soften up those pawns, so our knight is just stuck. You could play bishop d2 and just kind of play rook a d1 and keep playing. It's probably not terrible, but you know, I wasn't pumped about it. Then I came up with the idea of fe5, and in general, fe5, knight e5, we weren't happy about black getting a knight on e5, but here, queen g3, attacking the knight and the pawn, I don't see anything great for black. You know, and white's pieces are going to come out. It was not a Vienna system high king bubbles, though this queen maneuvering to f3 and g3 feels Vienna-like. This is a Sicilian. A Sicilian with a knight trade on c6. I'll show you real quick. Right here. Trade. And then, you know, becomes like a double king pawn, right? All right, so here's how we find it. Then we find fe5. We see knight e5, queen g3 is good. We're threatening queen f7. Bishop e6 for black would be logical. Then we'll just develop another piece. You know, and now we'll be able to put our knight on d2, bring out our rook. Game goes on. You know, totally playable for white. So that's the thought process. That's the thought process. Okay. So let's catch up with the game position, although I think it was pretty much... Oh yeah, it's only down a pawn. You don't have to stop looking just yet. Doubles rooks against the f pawn that you can't take because the knight's hanging. So yeah, tough position. Black's eventually going to do this to keep the extra pawn. Beautiful bishop pair, extra pawn. These pieces are not amazing for white, the minor pieces. Tough. Let's check our other board. Okay, let's see what we had. We had this position here, check, king over, takes and takes, comes back. Black doesn't take on f4 with check. It's like she has a rule to only play weird tactical moves. Hard to imagine what could be wrong with knight f4 check here. That's really weird. So now we get like the pure rook ending. That f-pawn's moving too far away from the king. Rook f8 wins that pawn again. Oh, I guess there's rook h6 is less bad. Because f7, you know, the black king just comes and gets you. But rook h6, I guess... King d7, king f4, king e6, still not great. f7 check, king f7, rook b6 is drawing at least. But if white wanted an edge here, this would be the move, right? And black could get really greedy, but now everybody's out of position for this pawn, right? The pawn can't be stopped because of rook f1, rook h8 check. Yeah, so white should keep the king near this passed pawn. King f4 makes the game a little harder for black. f7 played, so that pawn's a goner. I guess white can go king f4, king e5. Interesting, black played king d8, not king d7. Yeah, so I'll just put on the board what I'm thinking, folks, is bringing up the king. And you can walk over and eat these. You will actually try rook d8 here as a defensive maneuver. White and queen, rook h8, rook takes, get the rook and pawn ending, but the king and pawn ending, right? f7, f8, king takes, rook h8, and then trade. But then the black king is close enough to stop white. Okay, we've got to move in the game. King f4, b5. So white can play king e5. This b pawn is very, very slow. And then even king e6 if it keeps going, right? And then at the end you just do something like this and win for white. So after king e5, black played king e7. But white's king can take. If black trades rooks, king c5, king e6, king takes, king d6. Okay, yeah. Okay, so it's still, the king and pawn ending is still a draw here. King c6, b4, d5, b3, d6, b2, d7, b1, queens. Yeah, okay, so it's a drawn endgame here. We get these trades. I suppose white could try and keep rooks on the board to keep torturing black a tiny bit, but it doesn't do much. Oh, my shoulder. Ooh. Like rook h6, rook f6 amounts to the same thing. But yeah, I mean, if you really wanted to torture your opponent, you could play a move like rook h1 or rook h8 or rook h5. Play a few more moves. With this king position, you've got very good chances to win this pawn. Then black has to know a Philidor position to draw against the d-pawn, right? All right, white traded. King e6, d5. Against king b5, king d5, right? Would stop the pawn right away. So white plays d5 check to keep the pawn on the board. If black played king e5, then I think d6 was very risky for black. We could check if it wins or not. King e5, d6, b4, d7, b3, d8 wins. King e5, d6, king e6, king c6, b4, d7, b3, d8 wins. Yeah, so king e5 would lose here. King d7 holds the draw. Just staying in front of the pawn. And king and one pawn against king is basically like the first theoretical endgame to learn after learning the basic checkmates, right? I'd say the basic checkmates are king and 2 rooks against king, king and queen against king, king and single rook against king. Once you know those basic checkmates, then this position here, king and 1 pawn against king, is the first endgame to learn. All right, draw agreed. Epic struggle. Epic struggle. Let's see what's going on in this game. King e7, knight c4, rook f8, knight a5, bishop c8. Expanding on the king side with the pawn majority. If black plays b5, I guess white has knight c6 check and bishop d5. So black will just play g4 here. Yeah. Let me tone down this light in my face. Not everybody, Putsy. Some people use their time great. Some people play really quickly. You're seeing the worst habits actually from the 2 highest rated players here, who are probably underestimating their opponents and sort of like in a hurry to clean up the win and move on or something like that, who don't see it properly as a learning experience to some extent because they're outrating their opponents. I mean, I can't guarantee that, but you get a little bit of that feel, I think. But, you know, in this other game we were watching, Ho-Along kept a very good pace throughout the game, you know? Kept a very nice pace throughout the game here against somebody who was playing super fast. And, yeah, and then we're in this game of Alvin's here. You know, Alvin's playing reasonably. Has used 45 minutes to play 20 moves. Yeah, Jan, the rain just comes and goes. Massive downpour, then it stops, then it pours, then it stops. It's really cool. It's very nice. I like the variety. It keeps you from ever getting too hot or too cold or too wet or too dry. Quite surprised that black didn't go for g4. That looked like a very strong move for black. Very desirable. But the question from Rita is, we need to keep rooks on as white here. So we have to negate the d file somehow without trading them. If all the rooks traded, yeah, white would be worse. So I guess by keeping f6 under threat for now, white's preventing black from using the file, right? That's what they're doing for now. Yeah, the rain's really nice, Jan, especially like if you're not too cold, right? If it's really cold and windy and rainy at once, which was the weather in Normandy, you know, for like 7 or 8 months straight. That's kind of annoying because you're wet and you can't dry off and you're cold and the wind is getting into your clothes and it's putting the water inside your clothes instead of outside of your clothes. But when the temperature's warm and then there's some rain, that's really nice together. Okay, so g4, white rook moves away. white couldn't trade at all because that would be a discovered check and then the rook would drop. So white just has to step away and keep the pawn on h3 defended in case black trades on h3. And now maybe this rook is going to try to use the g file in some way. Maybe gh, rook h to g8. Nope, 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 nope. Can't use the g file like that, David. So maybe a waiting move, like getting ready to come here. We get the trade. I do in general like the move g4 for black. I feel like it opened up some space near the white king and a target for the bishops. This isolated pawn is always going to be something that the bishops can go after off on the side of the board, undefended by other pawns, disconnected from them. It's going to be a great target in general for black's bishop pair. And then if we could get the rook to the g file, which right now obviously we can't, but something like this, then you can go for h4, rook takes g3 kind of ideas, pressing in if you need to, or doubling rooks eventually. The problem for black is I thought they should play maybe a waiting move before trading, because if you go here now, doesn't white get the g file first and then you can't challenge it because of these squares? I feel like it's not obvious what Isuru should do next. I don't know about this move. Okay, this makes sense. Just blowing things up a little bit, making space for those rooks. I would not trade on a5, Putsy. No, that knight on a5 is far out of the game at the moment. Oh, good point, Jan. Not only is white stopping rook g8, we're stopping rook g1. So, but still, maybe if we go rook h7, maybe this could still be annoying. Right, and if we switch this file, maybe the knight should come back first to stop rook d2. Yeah, to me it feels like rushing Rita. Like my move here would have been something like rook here, then rook here. Or maybe I should go through h6 just to defend this pawn more and make it easier to play rook d8 if I need to, right? Rook here, rook here. That said, the f5 move looks pretty decent, so we'll see how that plays out. I suppose black could have also played f5 without trading on h3, but trading on h3 has its pleasantness as long as we don't have problems with the g file here. Does white have rook g3 in the live position? Maybe. But then f4, rook check, king f6. You would lock down that h-pawn Neko, huh? Just play h4. So here it seems like black could take on e4, doesn't it? Or I suppose push f4. Doesn't seem anything wrong with f4 either. But fe4 looks like it wins a not amazing pawn, but like it wins a pawn while trading everything. And you could also throw in bishop takes a5 and then trade the rooks, which is what Isuru did. But I feel like Isuru's, you know, playing a little too quickly. There's nothing wrong with fe4 first. The knight on a5 was not going anywhere. Yeah, it is head of dog. There's a lot of good players out there nowadays. Yeah, should have definitely kept that bishop. I mean, was black worried that with fe4, rook f8, rook f8, rook f8, king f8, the knight's suddenly going to do something? You've got the king locked a little bit away. You're threatening bishop takes h3. They're going to defend h3. And then if you want to, you could trade the knight there. If you think that's like easy and technical. But when you trade this in advance, you're trading the better bishop. And that means white has opportunities like rook e3 or rook g3 here, which you have to reckon with and calculate. So it's just giving some chances. Rook f7 check. Oh, you think that, Jan, maybe with the knight on a5 being able to take on b7 somehow? Let's check. I didn't look at that right. Check. Takes. Oh, that's what the FM was thinking of, Jan. Right on. Oh, so we switch everything we say around, and now we say bishop a5 was very nice. Well, I don't know about very nice. Now I almost want to play f4 instead of trying to take that extra pawn on e4. I almost want to just say here, like, I don't need to deal with rook f7 now. Pawn's amazing, right? The threat is bishop g4, rook d3, bishop e2. But also, let's say white, sees my threat and gets out of it in one of many ways. That's a good strong pass pawn, and this bishop's amazing still. I don't know. Let's see if this. Let's see though what's in mind. Oh, we don't even get rook f7, huh? I guess also against rook f7 now the king maybe goes up to d6 and c5 and stuff. Huh? But yeah, I mean, this is not going to challenge black. This is exactly the position that they dreamed of, the full simplification. h4 to avoid bishop takes h3. And, compared to king h2, now you have to defend h3 forever, right? So h4, we get a pawn off of a light square, and black's going to have to defend this pawn. Well, except that they can do this first and take over this area. So bishop g4 takes control of this square, and the pawn can go pretty far. That looks pretty winning. King e7, I would play e3. Make a wall, right? Keep that white king away from your pawn. King e7 lets white go king f2, king e3, right? What? Seems elementary. Should be very winning, same colored bishop ending with these two extra pawns, even though they're doubled, plus a5, some structural problems for white. And e3 would have made it very easy. I mean, honestly, you could always play e2 at some point if you wanted to tie white's king to e1. If they ever trade into the king and pawn ending, that's dead. But I think just this shield, where the pawn's on the dark square and the bishop's on the light square, the white king can't really get at the position, right? Black's got this square covered as well. This square from the bishop. It's just walled in, and then you bring your king. It's a very easy technique. Bishop on f3 makes sense, Jan, but black definitely sent the king in the other direction. Not towards the h-pawn like you wanted. And you know what? If you went to g4, there would be bishop e6, bishop c8. It should be too slow and lose to your h-pawn. But white's not without counterplay, actually, this thing. It's not like you'd be certain to win with 5 seconds on the clock on autopilot. You'd want to calculate a little something there. But how is black planning to break through here with king c5? I guess bishop f1. And then maybe you have to move the b pawn and trade another pawn to make progress. Yeah, it's like, it can make you mildly nervous. I think white loses the race by at least 2 tempi, which seems like a mile, and it might even be 3 tempi or something insane, but it's the kind of thing that you do need to briefly look at or calculate or something. Okay, so we got a question and a move. Bishop f1. So now against king c5, the bishop will be sort of zugzwang. White will have to spend a move on a3 or a4, something like that, one of their precious tempi. And maybe black can go king d5. Maybe just back and forth and zugzwang. But Jan's question is, good night, Scotty. If the king got to g4 and white gave a check and black took, would king f2 slow black down by blocking the pawn? Presumably black would have a way around that. You know, maybe bishop g4 and your bishop never even makes it to c8, so there's no counterplay. With the tempi that you gave, right? Black would have that move bishop g4 in time. So then there's no counterplay and you just take your time, right? Reset everything. King g5, h4, h3, you know, then push an e-pawn, then push the h-pawn. e3 check to play king g3 makes sense, but it's not necessary. You can do in any order. At that point, you're up 3 pawns, and white's not threatening anything. You've got all the time in the world, so any breakthrough you like. See if anyone else is starting any new games, huh? Pretty quiet Friday night today. Looks like we've got somebody new waiting for a game, but no opponent yet for them. And there's a new game starting. Oh, I saw them. I spotted them. immediately. What? No, chess.com. Wait. How quickly have they played this opening? An hour and 34 against an hour and 36. But chess.com's interface just doesn't show me who's in the tournaments or what games have started forever and ever. I go and look and it just doesn't even show it. Whoa! White wins a pawn. The knight threatening the queen. And then advances a lot of pawns. Guess it's pretty sound. Pretty sound. But even though it says 90-30, that one's basically a blitz game. Still doesn't show that they have a game. So annoying. King c5, a3, king d5. So white still needs to prevent king here. I guess it... Does white maybe have king f2, king e3? Instead of moving pawns? Can black make progress here? I think so, man with head of dog. Hey, good morning, Richie. Let's say king f2 gets played, for example. I could play c5 with the plan of c4 and bring the king across. White could push me out. But now I could eventually attack this with my bishop, maybe. Or I could come around like this. Actually, maybe white's better off not taking that. Just sitting around. Takes. Here. I mean, how many a-pawns are ever going to do anything for black? Now I've got 6 isolated pawns for black. I'm 3 pawns up. Still looking to make the final progress. Maybe I could have played b5 instead. I was briefly like, oh no, don't allow any counterplay. White will take and have a passed a pawn, but who cares? You know, this just wins easily, and the b pawn just wants to keep going if white doesn't take it. Just winning for black easily. So pawn takes. Sorry. So pawn takes is forced. King takes. King's coming this way. Yep, that'll do it. That'll do it. Winning easily. And with the king on f2, indeed, this would be even easier for black. King d4. So king d5. Yeah, black's going to make progress. I don't really see how to hold black off any further, anymore, any longer. Bishop h3 at this point. Yeah. Yeah, that could be a try here. King d2 was played. Black plays king e6. Huh, heading nowhere. Weird. Feels like this is really a moment to push that c-pawn, right? We already know if c4 check, the king can come forward. If white doesn't play c4 check, black puts the pawn on c4, and that makes room for the king to come across. Yeah, weird. He backs off. So now I think, like, you put the king back here, and against king f5, you just check, block, and come back. Or even, I mean, what's black doing? Just here, threatening this pawn. King e3 played. Still blitzing along over here. Holy blitz game, Batman. Rook on b1 is the piece white would want to improve here normally. Rook b2. That'll bring that rook into the game. Over here is needed to defend this pawn, or elsewhere on the king side. I think a5 also makes a lot of sense. Black goes along diagonal, rook should move, I would expect. I would just go to a2 and push a5. That seems to do something. Rook goes to c2. I don't know what that's about. Queen t1. Whoa. Oh, okay, so it was going so fast I barely even saw this. Black plays queen d8. So queen e1 is and queen d8 are both looking at that square. Did black have g5? I mean, normally they wouldn't want white to play f5. Did you have a specific idea in mind after f5? Or did you just think that you could then blockade the pawns? I don't think you'll be able to long term since black's got other weaknesses. You just wanted to blockade. Yeah, it's not going to work. Just the pawns on the light squares are too good. This bishop is now operating and white's very solid on these two files, so black's rooks lose their power. And that gives white a free hand for a5 and other things. But h4, what a weird move. Queen d7, looking at the weak square on g4. Suppose queen g3 makes sense now. But moving the pawns in front of white's king consistently is just not normal technique here. Let's check our classical game in between moves in the blitz game. So after king e3, black came back this way, and this time in the same position played c5 instead of king e6. So that is the idea we thought was winning. They stopped for a little bit after this king e6, king e3. They saw, I guess, that king f5, bishop h3 was not making any progress. Thought like 2 minutes and went back to where they had been. It's hard to get out of any habits, right, Richie? So if you get in the habit of being optimistic or pessimistic or slow or fast or whatever it is, Very hard. You know, there's like a perfect amount of tension to feel during a chess game, or like an optimum amount of tension to feel for most people during a chess game to perform at your best. If you're completely relaxed and not worrying at all, you generally don't play your best. You don't put in the same kind of effort, right? You make, easy decisions. You don't stress out. You feel good, but you don't get deep. And if you're too tense, that's not good either. So this was resignable when rooks came off. Yeah, Rita, but black has not like convincingly proved it yet. And if your opponent doesn't prove it convincingly, then you can sort of hang around, right? Move back and forth and wait for them to prove it. Also, black's playing so quickly, white might think there's a chance they'll blunder. I would. Yeah, so Richie, you're only tantalized. You're only tantalized by a certain kind of opponent. Yes, Butsy. White has a4 at some point with the black king on c5. For sure. That'll be a defensive option. Black will maybe be able to play bishop d1 then and trade the e-pawn for the other pawn. Okay, instead he's going straight for the b6 or b5 idea here. That makes sense too. Straight for b5, yeah. Bishop c4 doesn't really improve white's position. White's position at this point doesn't really improve, right? It just kind of sits there and hopes that black's king can't get into the game. It's not like this bishop's better on f7 than on f1. It's just wherever. Just sitting around to me. Why would there be no b4 then? Oh, you want to trade and on king b5 play bishop c8. Quick thinking, Richie. And bishop c4, b6, what do you do? Bishop e6 anyway, just sit there. Oh no, maybe bishop takes a6, huh? Yeah, bishop takes a6. b5 played quickly. You couldn't play bishop c8 in that other position, by the way, because black would play king b5, right? As long as black's pawn is not on b5, you're not yet ready to play your bishop move. Cool as the idea is. You need black to fill the b5 square with their own pawn to then go for that bishop move. You know what's interesting here? Bishop e6, bishop g4. White could actually take on g4 and play h5. And just win with that one passed h-pawn and a 2-pawn down rook and king and pawn ending. So bishop e6, bishop g4. I thought of it at first as a candidate move because normally black can offer a bishop trade in any position and white has to avoid it. So I was trying to stop bishop c8. But bishop e6, bishop g4, white trades and wins. Okay, cool. You're welcome, Richie. All right, so white trades and the king is loose. Loose, loose, loose. Loosey-goosey. Bishop b3 looks like the last line of defense. The white's obviously getting in more and more danger here with that trade on b6, letting the black king forward. Yeah, it's a funny thing. b5 didn't really threaten much other than pawn takes bishop, I guess. White takes it, I think erroneously. Okay, bishop b3. Last line of defense, as mentioned. Hi, Thomas. How's it going? Okay. Oops. Bishop b3, a5, threatening nothing. Again, Alvin doesn't hold still. He pushes the king back. And Putsy says now the black king has to go for the h-pawn. Which we believe white... No, white, because they played c4, their bishop can no longer come around to f1 and h3. There's no route for this piece. It's stuck. Wait, maybe you could go here. And then when the king gets close, check you from d7? Yeah. Okay, so the bishop can get out this way at least. And then, And yeah, it's not so easy to make progress, is it? Bishop taking on e4 is a big mistake, right? Because the king pawn ending should be a win for black. But the only place for the black king to go is f5 and then bishop d7 check. Holy moly. This could be a draw here. Bishop a4 to d7. Yeah, Putsy, that's the one extra option we have as black is to move the bishop away at some point. Okay, I see what you mean. You're wondering here, could black play c4, bishop c2, and then eventually get this square by running this bishop out of places to go, huh? Well, let's say you just play... Oh, if you play a5, then a4 check, king c5. That might be good enough. Just a5, right? If the bishop moves, you'll play king a4. And if a4, you go here. White has to move something, right? And then you just come here. Oh, hang on. But the bishop, but the pawn over here. Yeah, whichever way they go, you can defend it. Against king e4, there's bishop c6 winning. And now you've got two different pass pawns instead of two e-pawns. So c4 looks like a win for Isuru. Bishop c2, a5. Can white make a king move? Yeah, white can make king moves, right? As long as they've got king moves, we're not making any progress. Sure, you could play bishop g4. Maybe white takes your pawn, or maybe white just keeps playing king e3. I don't see the breakthrough. And here I think white could play bishop d7 or wait for king f5 and then play bishop d7. Yeah, amazing that Alvin held this game. Incredible. That game was so dead. So we had the question earlier about should Alvin or could Alvin have resigned when the rooks were traded. Could have, yeah. But would not have had this incredible experience of playing out this game or the half point from drawing it. Okay, we got king f6 played, bishop d7. Yeah, in an OTB tournament, you have to think about other stuff. I agree. But, I don't know. Maybe if you play some good defense, your opponents will offer you a draw to save energy themselves. Maybe they'll give up on winning. I don't know. Plus, you're better off scoring an extra point now than having more energy next round that you may or may not save a point with, right? Every point we can hold. That was really difficult. I don't think we even spotted exactly when black should have won, did we? All right, I hope you had a good game. Those look like maybe Japanese characters. I can't read your name. But there were only so many people playing, so maybe I can guess. Omae wa hinakaki desu ka? See, 2 passed pawns, e6 and f6. That was the end of this game. Let's see what happened. Somehow that f-pawn got past black's g-pawn. Oh, from the queen being on the g-file. And this is nice with the c-pawn. Now white can come crushing even further forward and use the c-pawn to gain more pressure. And here was a moment for e5. Why doesn't black try taking it? Oh, white's gonna play rook e4. That's what she set up. She used the c file to defend the f pawn from here to be able to play rook e4, and then take this, and the pawns just squash everything. Yeah, I heard. Glad you're getting some good preparation here. Hopefully you'll have a good tournament. Play a little bit better than last year. So g5 was tried, and then rook here just defending the pawn. Yeah. Nice. Smooth game here for Hinakaki. And Alvin still hanging in there. But yeah, we see no longer any way through for Isuru. Thanks for the raid, Pokochai. A little shout out here. Thanks, Thinker Teacher. Very kind of you to bring that enthusiasm. It's rather late at night here. I'll probably be going to bed any minute now. Yeah, I'm back in the States, Richie. Thank you, Pokochai. Thank you so much. I hope you had a good one too. Have a great day. I was in France for 1 year, Richie. Like 2 Augusts ago until last August. So I've been back in the States for 11 months now. Alvin takes the pawn? No! Oh, because has Alvin been tricked? If the bishop comes back to defend here, black has this move, huh? And coming in with the king? What happened? now black's completely winning it. I don't even know where he blew it. This endgame is very tricky. Bishop b5, bishop f5. Maybe bishop e8 here? You think bishop a6 was better than this? So with something like this, you're still planning to take here, huh? Yeah, I understand, Jan. I was pretty excited for Alvin too. What a tough defense he put up for so long. Ugh. So what did he do wrong? Someone wants bishop a4, somebody wants bishop a6. I was thinking maybe bishop e8. Right, with the idea that here, 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 I kind of repeat. If bishop f7, I can take. If king up, I can check. If bishop back to f5, I can go back to e8. And against bishop e6, I'm gonna have to trade a pawn, right? But at least I get two of them with some hope. I don't know. That's the best thought I had here. But the difference between bishop a4 and bishop e8 is if you go bishop a4 and black goes bishop e6 threatening your pawn, what do? In my line, I can take this in one move, right? So if you now go bishop d1, you're a tempo behind the other variation. So black's got one extra e-pawn compared to the other variation, maybe. And with the bishop anchored here, this pawn can go all the way there. You know, it's dangerous. I mean, you definitely would rather be on e8 and just take the pawn in one move, I think. No question. I don't know for sure if that's right. Still not over, but I guess black's bishop can take over the e4 square now. This game won't let me sleep. King heads away. What? I was thinking here, here, right? And then to here. Running around still hoping to come through here, huh? So now bishop f3 to e4. Takes it. Oh my god. Hang on, but like what was black's plan here, right? Bishop here, king here, bishop here. It's like he still hadn't figured it out, right? King b5, e4, king a5, e3. It's hardly even a race. Yeah. Wow, that endgame flipped several times. That was... And maybe it's not done flipping. Currently winning for black. I mean, it's the white king that could get locked on the A file, not the black one. Oh, you're thinking taking on E5 and then locking the black king on the A file? Thing is, like, the E file is just one step too far away from the A file to ever lock the black king there. Black can always, you know, move this pawn down the board till you get to like E3, king on E2 for white. You play king E4, king D4. The king has to back up. Then you step forward. King waits, right? You go to C3, E2, B3. They take your E pawn. You take their A pawn. They come to the D file. You come to the B file. So it's always one file too far away. Black maybe going to the wrong pawn here. The one that's closer to the E pawn. Don't know what to say. They might both be tired, yeah, like me. I mean, Asuru's played very fast, so shouldn't be that fatigued. Looks like he made it there before white could even get to the E-pawn. So that's it. King E5, king G3, and the H-pawn would go. Epic game finally ends. I loved it. But as you guys know, I'm headed to bed real quick now. That was exhausting. That got late for David. Hope everybody's doing well. Sunday we'll have our normal rapid tournaments at the normal time, 9:30 a.m. Pacific, which, since many of you seem to be in the UK, that'll be like 6:30 p.m. for you all, I think. Yeah. You did, Alvin, you did. We watched the whole game, so you can go back and check. We didn't find it all clearly, but yeah, definitely at some point your opponent slipped into a drawn position that they couldn't break out of. And let's see, where did we think there was a critical moment somewhere in this game? Oh, all our analysis has been deleted. Let's see. Your cat played bishop c6. Okay, yeah, bishop c6, yeah. Here, this is a key moment to look at. Somebody thought bishop a6, somebody else thought bishop a4, and I thought bishop e8 had a very good chance of being a draw. Anyway, you have plenty of time to review it. I'm going to go to bed. Good night, everybody. Much love to all of you. We could try to send a raid somewhere, and there must be somebody playing chess at this time of day or night. I don't know who any of these people are. Does anybody have a suggestion of where I should raid? Thinker teacher, you know anybody who's on right now? Yeah, have a great day, Alvin. Thanks for the game.